Okay, I'm going to talk about something. I usually don't make a lot of videos about gun control laws and current topics of it because it's a very complicated subject and it's difficult to explain a clear and concise opinion because it's muddled up in all types of different things. Now, what it is a couple of my subscribers had asked my thoughts and opinions on what is going on right now here. This is January 20th, 2020, and I'm talking about what's going on in Virginia, the state of Virginia. I guess when I got up this morning, had my first cup of coffee, the governor declared a state of emergency at the state capitol, and they're putting up fences and getting ready for riots and everything. And it's all about gun control. So I kind of made a little list about gun control, and we're going to talk about the history of gun control in the United States, starting off with the Second Amendment and each point in time in history where some large form of gun control has come up. Because it really didn't exist. There were no federal gun laws until 1935. Okay, in the U.S. Basically what happens anytime is some kind of event triggers something. There's some kind of a event which usually involves either the death of people or something. Some sort of horrific event triggers, or a trend of smaller events triggers a reaction and starts the whole debate. And the factors that kind of are involved and why it's complicated is, one of the factors is the political climate at the time. And this does change through history and over time. So all these factors are variables. The next thing, a lot of gun laws, and a lot of people push them or vote for them, the social class system of this country and how people look at themselves used to be, I don't know what you'd call it, college educated, upper middle class meaning you went to high school and had a regular job, and then the poor. Maybe I got the terms wrong, but now the class system screwed up to where it's either liberals, Republicans, or conservative, and then illegals. So I don't know, the whole system, and that what changes it, people's, how they look at themselves in these different stratas or class systems, and it does exist. I know people say in America it's not supposed to, but it does. And this is where the country's kind of divided, okay? It's not so much social class, it's social class, how you look at it, okay? Conservative, liberal, whatever. Another factor that impacts all of this is the economy. This has an effect. Jobs, job market, is the economy good, is the economy bad, okay? This has a big effect on it. Okay, and then there's the psychology of all of this. What do I mean by that? It's more or less the reaction or the mindset of people, how they psychologically look at it. A lot of things are triggered from one side, fear of the government trying to take over too much of our life, and on the other side, fear of that it's, I walk into a public place, I send my kid to school and he's killed because of a mass shooting. People shoot up a Walmart, okay? This is another form of fear, okay? I just want to mind my business, live my life. I don't want to walk in and buy a gallon of milk at Walmart and catch a bullet at the checkout counter because some nutcase decided he's going to kill everyone that's shopping at Walmart today. Okay, and then the fear of sending your children to school. Are they going to live through the day? I mean, that's something people don't like to have to deal with this. Okay, so the psychological thing is another thing that drives all of this. So, like I said, things are getting really intense up there in Virginia. So let's start by looking at kind of some of the points historically how gun control started. It all goes back to the forming of the United States and the Constitution. Okay, the constitutional right of the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Now you got the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to bear arms. Those are like top three most important to most people. Okay, and they do come into play because the First Amendment, freedom of speech, is where people protest on their opinion one way or the other on gun control, which starts a lot of the commotion here that's going on today. When you interpret the Second Amendment, the people that founded this country were breaking away from a very closed monarchy system. And the idea of running this country was no standing army. Everybody that was a citizen of this country, okay, had the right to bear arms to protect themselves and their property, okay, to protect their community. That's where a town or village got together and formed a unit. And up until the Civil War, that's where units were formed. All the men in the local militia lined up. That was a unit. It was the whole town. All the able-bodied men from the town went to battle as a unit, got federalized, and went to the Civil War. Okay? National Guard units are like that today. When you mobilize a National Guard unit, they're made up of people from a geographic area close by. So it still goes on. Then, in the worst case scenario, not so much as forming an army to defend the country, your town, your state. In the old days, your state kind of come first before the national view of it all. If you look at it and take it to the extreme, the Second Amendment is a clause in the Constitution that gives the citizens the right that if the duly elected government turns corrupt, lies, or tries to usurp power and take control, which, you know, as an elected official, their control is temporary and not permanent. The Second Amendment gives the citizens the right to overthrow an unjust government by force. A lot of people don't like to look at it that way, but that's basically the underlying meaning. And why I bring this up is because of what's going on in Virginia is starting to kind of drift to that far extreme. Okay, declaring a state of emergency, I don't know whether that's for grandstanding or what the hell's going on up there. So, we get past our history point, and really the only gun control you've seen was like in the Old West, where a locality or a town, because at the end of the cattle drive, guys got paid, would go down to the fun section of town where the brothels and bars were and blow off steam, start murdering each other. And so a lot of these little towns had a city ordinance. When you're in town, you got to check your gun. Whether or not that was done or true, maybe it was, but that's kind of the first form of gun control. And that was just in these places because you might have one law enforcement guy and a few thousand people in town, so it's difficult to deal with this. So then, as time progressed, most of the gun control laws would be targeted to a certain class of people. So it takes us to about 1900, and in New York City, they had what they call the Sullivan Laws. It was kind of famous because New York City is one of the largest cities in the United States, still is today, and it is where a lot of the immigrants, it was their port of entry, henceforth why you had Ellis Island and stuff. So a lot of people emigrating from all points around the globe would come to New York City and settle right down there. And that's where they show you in the movies organized crime, the mafia, all this other stuff. But you had a lot of immigrants who immigrants at the time were kind of despised by the Americans that were here already. And they were considered the very bottom class. So a lot of these laws were targeted towards them, like the Sullivan Act and that, to keep handguns out of the hands of the lower classes, which were impoverished, struggling for money, and would use firearms for violent, gun violence. Okay, this is something that is not new. A lot of the gun violence and the problems these people are complaining about comes from the social status and the outlook from other people. It's kind of like, well, us law-abiding citizens, kind of underhandedly get our money, where, immigrants that don't speak English or something have to take it by force through criminal activity or violence against each other. This also, at the time, goes to a lot of the southern states, had weird laws that kind of targeted keeping guns out of the hands of the freed slaves, which were, again, still another low end of society, the lower classes. Even though the slaves were freed, they didn't kind of like it. Social advancement in the South for many years for freed slaves was not going to happen. So that's how that ended at the Civil War, and there were laws and ordinances that kept your lower classes or people that didn't have money, tried to keep guns out of their hands. Then, as society changed again, we have something called the Roaring Twenties. Big increase in money, and this is where technology started to come in. Radio. Okay, the news. The news was broadcast on the radio. The economy was good. People were buying these nifty appliances. You turned into it, and you could listen to shows in the news and be kept up to date just about throughout the whole United States. A radio broadcast can be transmitted, and everybody in the country can hear what happened. Within, say, a 24-hour period, news traveled faster. Okay? So what happened is you had two things there that happened. One was a change in the law and the attitude of society. In 1918 or 1919, I believe, they outlawed the manufacture and sale of alcohol, which prohibition. Now, contrary to popular belief, this was a popular movement in the U.S., and this is why it was a constitutional amendment to ban the manufacture and sale of alcohol throughout the whole United States. Well, about the same time you had the Roaring Twenties. There was a huge boom in the economy. People were making money in that. And even though the people supported banning the manufacture of alcohol, the minute they did that, the increase for it rose up, or people were willing to pay. Now, let's say that the increase didn't, they say it did, some say it didn't, but people were willing to pay good money, and the economy was good, and people had cash, to where this became a very lucrative business of making illegal and selling illegal alcohol. Henceforth, this is where crime kind of got organized and turned into huge profit businesses, much like the drug industry is today, which I think nowadays I'm told it is an $8 billion a year industry, the sale of illicit drugs in the U.S. And this is also tied in to gun violence, gun control. Okay, this is a factor in current day problems. So you had the Roaring Twenties, and even though they had high capacity magazines, it would be the Thompson submachine gun, the BAR, you had what they also called the motorized bandit. Cars and roads were also popular, another technology. Now you could drive from point A to point B pretty quick, rob a bank in one state, get out of the state, and they couldn't touch you. So this is why the federal government had changed several things. One, they changed the laws that if you commit murder, rob a bank, they federalized all the banks. So you rob a bank, you can be tracked down, getting out of one state. It used to be you committed a crime, say, in Oklahoma, and you drove to Nevada. Well, they couldn't do nothing to you in Nevada because the law didn't have jurisdiction across state lines. Okay? Well, they changed that. And one of the gun laws they changed was the National Firearms Act of 1935. And what happened is, if you watch the old gangster movies, and now that you can get a news feed on the radio, what was horrifying is when these criminals would come, because the economy was bad, they used machine guns or any kind of guns. They used to just go in, shoot up banks, rob places. And then the criminal element with prohibition, you had gang wars, like drug gangs shooting at each other, and innocent people would be killed. Okay? This is where the psychological factor, there was an outcry from the public, because it was in the news, they were seeing it every day. You had criminals that were just like Bonnie and Clyde robbing banks and driving from one end of the country to the other. And then you had prohibition, and you had, just much like your gang violence, because that's what it was, criminal organizations vying for territory and everything else. Same as the same problem we have today with drugs. And in their dealings and killing with each other, it would get escalating and more violent, to where at one point they did kind of react well and keep it amongst themselves, but then it spilled over, and you see in the old movies where a child was shot during a shootout in front of a restaurant or storefront or something. And so this had to stop. So what they did is they made it legal to make booze, and that put an end to the kind of the open gang violence. But also they passed another restrictive gun law, and the first national gun law, National Firearms Act of 1935, which banned guns more or less, or made you register them. They didn't quite ban them. You can still go and register them and buy them, but you had to register silencers, short barrel rifles, sawed-off shotguns, and automatic weapons. It wasn't illegal to own them, and you can still purchase them to this day. But that was the first restriction, where you must go to the ATF, fill out a form, request, and get a letter from the local sheriff and all this other stuff, and say, hey, I want to buy a submachine gun, I want to buy a silencer, and you have to do it. That's still on the books today. Where the illegality altogether comes is certain states do not allow you to buy these things. New York State's one of them. You cannot own an automatic weapon, silencer, sawed-off shotgun. Whether the federal government gives you permission or not, the state law totally bans it. They don't want them in the state. This is where you get this two-tiered type of inconsistency. Federally, you can own something, but state and local, you can't. Okay, so it gets confusing. All right, so then we go on. You go through the Second World War and all this other stuff. And then you get into where the big boom, the 50s, 60s, where America was great, but you had this thing called the Cold War. The economy was good, people were happy and satisfied, firearms were popular, surplus firearms, it was like the golden era. All that stuff left over from World War II come in, and you could sell it, buy it. Guys would go buy cases of guns and had a mail order business. I knew a guy. He'd just fill his barn up with cases of old rifles. He had an import-export license and was a firearms dealer. He had a business. He would go down, purchase guns by the case, mail you a list. I got this condition, and if you wanted to buy a rifle, you sent him a check and he mailed it to you. Okay, there was no restrictions to mail shotguns, rifles, pistols, whatever through the mail. Well, during the Cold War, and the U.S. government used to sell surplus 45s, M1 Garands, and it wasn't until the late 50s the government started selling M1 carbines. So basically, you wrote a letter saying, I'd like an M1 Garand, sent a check to a government depot, and they would mail you a rifle to your house. This was not illegal until 1968. The political thing that happened there, during the Cold War, there were different factions in the government, military people that wanted to overthrow the government, start a nuclear war with Russia. And my great uncle was on the sheriff's department out in Los Angeles, and he went out in the desert and found where this retired army general was stockpiling weapons and that he was just raising money and buying it from the government, and he was going to overthrow the government. And you had your President Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated. There was all these assassinations going on. So the mindset the shock, like I said, an event triggered it. The political climate's bad, and it kind of pissed the government off that its own ex-generals were buying surplus guns to throw them out of office through force. So they come up with a plan, and then you had the 1969 Firearms Act. And that's basically where you had to fill the form out and answer some questions, and they kept records. But the thing is, these records are not centralized. Okay, it was kind of a feel-good thing, made it look good. Everyone had to be a federally licensed dealer, which you have to go through a background check and have to get a dealer's license. There's rules. You can't send guns through the mail no more. A dealer can send it to a dealer, but you can't just buy a gun and have it sent. You have to go somewhere, answer questions, and you have to identify yourself. Okay? And this was from the political climate of the time. And really, it was kind of a BS type of law, because, as long as they asked you, are you a felon, are you taking drugs? You could be out there shooting up heroin in the parking lot and say, no, I'm not addicted to drugs. There's no way to prove any of that. Okay? Then we go, so that was status quo until the 80s when they tried to assassinate President Reagan. Okay, and then they had a big call for changes, and that's when they had the Brady Bill, and that's where you kind of had to have your background check. You had to call in and do something, and added further things to it. But then again, it is not a total registration of guns. In other words, when I go down, background check, all that other stuff, buy the gun, say I buy a shotgun, well, I keep it for a while. If I go and sell it to somebody, I can sell it to them. They don't have to prove a background check. And, the trail of the gun gets lost. Now, like in New York State, your handgun is registered not only to the dealer, but it's registered in Albany to the state. When the dealer sells it, you have to go get a permit through the local permit bureau, which is in the county office building. Then there's paperwork filed in a subsection where they know that it's registered locally. Albany knows that you have it, you have a permit, you have the gun and the serial number. I want to sell it to someone, I have to go back to the office with the individual and say, hey, I'm selling this gun to this guy. We fill these forms out, we pay fees, this and that, they check this and do this. That's total firearms registration. Okay, that exists on a state-by-state basis. Okay? So now we're progressing up to where we get here. What's happened in Virginia? Okay, the political climate is tearing down these Civil War monuments all through North Carolina, Virginia, and all these southern states. In the past 4 or 5 years, they ripped down here at the Chapel Hill School, Silent Sand. This was a big thing in my state. This is where your political class system, this and that. Now, if there's students there, they're offended that the Founding Fathers put this monument up, go to another school. Okay? If that really upsets you that bad, tearing the monument doesn't change who founded and the drive of these, political drive of these people behind the school. You just want that diploma with that name on there so you can demand a high-paying job. Go to another school. Okay, go to Berkeley or something. But that was a big deal of them ripping that down. There were riots, protests. There was another statue in Graham they wanted to take down, and the news media lied. Thousands of people turned out, blocked off Highway 40, and people just went and filled that little tiny town up in the main street, the statue, thousands of people, to protest them removing it. And they still have not removed that statue to this day. Okay, this is where you got your events. You had people saying enough's enough, and one Saturday everyone drove into that town to where the exits were blocked. They were parking on Highway 40, and thousands of people went there and just stood in the center of that little town around that statue. And the local news people tried to play it down that nobody came, nobody showed up or nothing. They would not report what happened. Okay? So now we're getting into Virginia. Virginia had the same incident, but it turned violent. Okay, we had somebody get run over, and there was a big thing on the national news. There was violence there. There was some kind of neo-Nazi rally, and it turned violent. I don't know if anyone was killed, but the big tragedy was a guy drove over some protesters over the Civil War monuments. Then they had a couple school shootings in the colleges, I believe. So now we get to current day, the mindset. You don't see political assassinations. Other than terrorists attacking the United States, there is no homegrown group of people looking to overthrow the government, at least not that I know of, or hasn't been on the news. But what you have is you have the people demanding total gun control and confiscation, and then on the other extreme you got people saying, the mindset is, I bear arms, the right to bear arms, to defend myself and my family. And the thing where this side is getting kind of more pressure, I'd say, or more of a response from them, is you always had people wanting to ban guns, and it just never got enough momentum. Actually, the amount of people that want it is quite small compared to the people that don't want it. That's why the laws are never passed, okay? Because majority of people realistically kind of don't want stuff like that, okay, in one form or another. But what is happening psychologically with people now is you turn the news on. All the past 3 months, gun violence, robberies. There was this weekend, some guy tried to rob in downtown Greensboro, where it's crowded, all these people, tried robbing a bank, a Biscuitville, and another store. Oh, a grocery store. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't a bank. It was a grocery store, a Biscuitville, and some other business. Just walk in with a gun and get money. He hit 3 or 4 places and driving around, had the whole police force chasing him. They did catch him. Nobody was shot. But here's where the fear and the psychological factor is. Irregardless whether you want gun control or not, you're minding your business. It's Saturday afternoon. My wife sends me down to the grocery store, and I go in there and there's somebody running around with a pistol trying to stick up the grocery store or whatever. You don't need that. And really, it doesn't matter how your opinion is, but see, this is the psychological thing in the political conditions, which is driving fear. Okay? This is where if you had people that kind of really don't mind, gun control or whatever, this is where you start pushing them more towards the side of gun control. Okay? It doesn't do it to me. Okay? It just means that I would carry a smaller gun in my pocket at all times. It's basically my response to it. But some people say, hey, you know what? Maybe we should have registration, this and that, because of fear, the psychological factors driving these people. Now, what causes all of this violence? The economy. The economy, even though under President Trump has, risen up, there are jobs out there, people do not wish to do manual labor. Okay? Tradesmen like me. I get 5 emails a day telling me, come and drive trucks for a delivery company, be the supervisor of a warehouse, go back into manufacturing. Okay, nobody's doing these jobs, and they pay well. It's just everybody wants to be a college-educated person that does something simple, isn't troubled or bothered, wants a convenient, easy life, and wants to be paid well and not have to care. Also, this is what kind of spurs on these people demanding gun control. They want to be convenient, they want their life easy, they don't want to be troubled, they don't want to have to think or worry about an act of violence or be a victim of a random act of violence, which honestly is becoming more frequent now. This is where the political stuff comes in. Well, what they did in Virginia is they decided, okay, we're going to cut through the crap, we're going to pass some gun laws that basically what they're doing is banning the ownership of firearms, certain types, which is all assault rifles, high-capacity magazines, whatever. If you go look up on YouTube someone called Liberty Bell, it's a woman. She just does basically like a video blog about all these political things. Kind of throws some satire in there. It's kind of funny, but I went to her website, and that's where I got the information about what they're trying to ban. So if you want all the little details, look up Liberty Bell. There's a couple other people that it's all they do is a video blog like this. So what they're doing in Virginia is they're going to pass this law, which basically, is like some states have them, a ban law. They're banning all assault rifles, high-capacity magazines, shotguns, and basically the only thing you can legally own is like a .22 bolt-action rifle and a revolver or something. I don't know the particulars, if only law enforcement's allowed, like in New York or some Connecticut. If you're law enforcement, you can own a 150 millimeter howitzer. They don't care. Okay, you're law enforcement. So, and this is where your social status comes in. Why is it somebody who's a cop, which, if I decided years ago, instead of going to a factory to go in law enforcement, I could have become a law enforcement officer. There was nothing in my background or nothing physically wrong with me where I couldn't qualify if an opening come up. How does that make someone who did a career choice, because say a guy I went to high school with, he became a law enforcement officer, and I went to work in a factory all my life, and now, because he's a law enforcement officer, he can own an assault rifle, but because I'm a factory worker, I can't. And where the fuck's the sense in that? So, this is what the big stink is about. And then they're going into the point where they're going to cut through all the crap. First of all, it's a total ban. I don't know if they're confiscating or if you have to register it and keep it. And then like in Jersey, when you die, it must be destroyed. The gun, the magazines, everything. I'm not quite sure the particulars of the law. But where they are going and reaching out further with this is not just a ban of certain guns. Like my polymer 80 videos, any of you keeping up, where I'm building guns and have parts, which parts federally are unrestricted. As long as it's not a frame or receiver, you can buy and sell all the gun parts you want all day long. There is nothing illegal, even if they're parts for automatic weapons. Okay, it is not against the law at this point in time. What they're going to do in Virginia is, if you have the parts for a banned gun, which is a Glock with high-capacity magazine, if you have the parts, like them little packets of parts I show you, and a slide and a barrel, it is going to be against the law to possess parts. So if I got like a Glock barrel and all the little components to stick in the frame, that is going to be against the law. That is a banned gun. It is illegal for me to have the parts. This is where it's getting crazy. So everybody's been discussing this, and I live in the neighboring state south in North Carolina, so that's a big thing here. And Greensboro's towards, it's not that far to drive up into Virginia. So it's a big thing, and people are looking at this. This is basically the laws they're passing, truthfully, are an outright ban and confiscation of firearms, which does go against the Second Amendment. They're going to push this. So now, putting this out and saying it's going to happen, okay, this is where it draws in. They've already had problems with the statute thing and drawing these groups in. And now, again, it's their own fault. Being Martin Luther King Day, it's also protest day. So if you got something to protest, you go to the state capitol. It's like something they set up in a commonwealth there to do. So they kind of created the mess by having that tradition of allowing your First Amendment rights to be said, And now these groups are coming, and they had trouble, and they had violence. You know, during the statute thing, someone was killed. There were people killed. So now the governor's panicking, and his response to just saying, look, maybe we'll look over the bill or something, and maybe use some sense and back off. But no, now he's got to say, I'm going to declare a state of emergency. Okay, now this is where a state of emergency starts. Then if there's rioting, then you get a martial law, and this is where the whole thing starts snowballing and getting really out of control and weird. I don't know if this is going to be a flashpoint in this country, if today's going to be an event that changes the law and the whole outlook. That's why I tried, you know, first part of this video, I tried to explain to you historically how a lot of things have not changed over time. It is just the events of that time period and the factors, the political climate, social class system, economy, and how people look at things, the psychological point of it too. And it changes with time. But we're back to the same thing again. There were points in the history over farming issues, over other political issues, where there were riots and violence, labor laws, okay? This is not anything new in the United States, okay? But the way the mindset is, and the way news travels, and the way news is distorted to fit the political goals of people. This could be a dark day for everyone in the United States of America, you know, or something that's going to be talked about. I do believe that the restrictive gun control laws will not have an effect on gun violence, gang violence, or the drug problem. Okay, these things must be addressed on a different level, and it must go after the people who are generating these problems. Not the guns, not arresting the gang members. You have to get people in this country not to buy the drugs anymore or to legalize them. Okay, there's only two clear-cut ways of doing it. Legalizing it, just like they did with booze, would end a lot of the violence, won't stop the drug problem. Getting people to stop wanting to use drugs, well, that's something nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole, and I doubt there's any way of actually doing that. So, you know, that's where people got to look at this. You're going to keep going on because it's not getting any better. The drug problem's growing bigger, and again, that's part of psychology. People are dissatisfied with themselves and their lives, which probably this is what creates the drug problem. It's a social problem and a psychological problem, I believe, okay, which unfortunately the side effects and collateral damage are gang violence, gun violence, robbery. They say 70% of all crimes committed, theft, thievery, is to finance drug habits. You know, this has a direct impact on crime, okay? So that's kind of my opinion on it. You know, I could have easily said I don't believe in what they're doing in Virginia is right. But see, it's not as easy to just say, oh, I don't agree with them. You have to look at the whole giant picture. And not only the gun control, the violence, the crime, the drug problem. It's all intertwined together. And our society is kind of not advancing in a positive direction when it comes to this. Okay? With the economy, politics, Democrats hate the Republicans, Republicans hate the Democrats. You know, it's a three-ring circus. But nothing's getting better. Granted, when President Trump came in, I believe the economy picked up, at least for working class people. There are more jobs out there. There's more money to be made. Okay, honestly, legally. But what it is we've gotten into where all these people want everything for nothing or to do nothing and get paid a lot. Nobody just wants to go and work a simple job and have a simple life anymore. Okay? Well, I think I've kept you on too long already, but that's my opinion of it. Historically, we're at another point, and really what they're doing in Virginia is just creating more problems than really solving anything. We're just making a national mockery out of the whole state. And that's my opinion on it.